Well, hi and welcome to Carl and Rick Talk Risk. Rick, how are you?
Awesome.
Nice. Well, I can tell you we are enjoying a fabulous Netherlands summer of 10 degrees and rain. So can only
Now
get
here
better.
it's hot and humid. I do not do hot and humid. Big
Yeah,
guys do not do hot and humid.
I'm with
Anyhow,
you. Yeah, I'm
such
with you
is
there.
life.
Yeah. Uh, Rick, I've been starting my reading list for the summer. Most of the books are assigned by you, not assigned, but you have good recommendations. One I chose by myself. It's been on my want to read for a long time. It's by a guy named Jaron Lanier. He's a technologist. He's been involved with the start of the internet and other technologies for a very long time, and he's very philosophical. So I have always wanted to read this book called "You Are Not a Gadget" by Jaron Lanier. And I got started on it, and there was something I think applies to risk. So let me try to explain it, and then ask you what you think. He talks very early on about this concept of lock-in, and lock-in in technology is, well, you make a decision to use Unix, and Unix gives you certain structure and capabilities and limits that impact anything that's built on top of Unix. So anything that comes after that has to follow Unix's rules, right? Just like a language. And he gives a very interesting music example, and this made me think of you. When they were converting real music, instrumental music, into digital music, it was a big struggle. And one of the people that figured it out, I don't recall his name, but he invented MIDI, MIDI. Um, and of course, everything had to be ones and zeros, had to be digital. So you couldn't replicate some sounds in that instruments make, that human voices make. But this has now become the way music is shared and how people collaborate on music. It's all in MIDI. It's been like that for a very long time. Um, and yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. So it like kind of set the path for digital music. It forced us down a pathway that we don't have to go down, but that's the way the technology moved. And so I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that so far? And I'll come back with a risk question.
Uh, uh, First off, my next book is going to feature digitization quite prominently.
Yeah.
Uh, Digitization uh, is a very, very, very sharp two-edged sword, in my opinion. Um, and it's becoming even sharper. And again, using my definition of risk is a possibility that bad or good things may happen. Digitization is absolutely a risk issue, both for the good and for the bad. Uh, I am more worried about the bad than I am optimistic about the good, though, with digitization. But there's a whole lot lost with digitization. Um, uh, there are gains. There's gains in efficiency. So digitization is allowing uh, this conversation to take place.
Yeah.
Um, but having said that, if we're sitting in the same room together in front of a camera, I think I made this point before.
Mm.
If we're sitting in the same room together, this conversation would probably be very different, even though it started off the same way.
Yeah.
And those are the nuances of digitization that we have. One of the problems of digitization is we've got an entire generation that's grown up with nothing but digitization.
Yeah.
Uh, in fact, arguably, you have, for most of your lived experience, have known nothing but digitization. Uh, Whereas, first third of my life was completely analog.
Right.
Um, uh, so I in my talks, in a lot of the talks I give, I talk about getting back to your example of digital music, is I talk about Wendy Carlos.
Yeah.
And I think I might have mentioned it here before, but just to finish this thought, Wendy Carlos, of course, was one of the first major musicians to fully embrace digitization and computer music.
Hmm.
And of course, her well-tempered Bach and the uh, uh, switched on Bach and her recreations of Beethoven for computer slash digital music are fantastic. And when the CD box set first came out, I actually had it ironically on vinyl. And then when uh, the CD box set came out, that's the only thing I've gone to a music store to get on the day it was released. That was hyper expensive for the time. Um, and I at the time had an ultra high end uh, sound system. I put it on and it was beautiful. It was awesome. It was great
Yeah.
to listen to. But after about 15 minutes, it loses its soul.
Right.
And so, yes, you don't get any, the stamps, cracks, and popples vinyl. You don't get, someone in the audience all the way through. But also, you don't get that warmth, that vibration that
Mm.
literally goes through you when you listen to live music, because every one of those 15 violinists is playing at a slightly different tempo, slightly off key. And
Yeah.
it's that, as Daniel Pink would say, that symphony of mistakes that creates the warmth. And so the digital music is perfect, but after a short period of time, you realize it has no soul.
Yeah.
So, yes, it sounds beautiful, but it has no soul.
Yeah.
So, I haven't read the book that you're talking about, but that's just one of my takes on digitization.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you
And a
another.
shout out to Wendy Carlos. All you classical music fans, go back and search in the archives or on Spotify for Wendy Carlos. Yes, it's ancient history now from the '80s, but anyhow.
Yeah. One more example Jaron brings up is chess. And he talks about Gary Kasparov in Deep Blue playing in 1997 and Gary Kasparov losing. And he explains that, well, eventually AI was going to beat humans no matter what. One thing we miss about that is the elegance of how the programmers, figured out how to convert moves into a digital format and have the computer predict how things are going to play out and everything. So he points out, first of all, there's a lot of human elegance that went into the programming. It's not just sheer hardware, right? It's not just processing power that beat Gary Kasparov. There's a very big human element. I never thought about that. The second thing he said is Gary Kasparov. Can you imagine being him? He's used to looking at an opponent like I'm looking at you, and I'm picking up on nonverbal communication, and it's a back and forth volley and everything. And he's staring at Deep Blue, which is probably just a blank screen. There's no cues. There's no yeah, poker face. There's nothing, right? There's nothing to play against. It's just purely moves. So Jaron Lanier's point here is that like chess was about more than just strategy. Poker is about more than just the luck of your cards. There was a non-verbal part of it, and computers have forced us to ignore that and to play their game. I thought it was kind of an interesting example.
I think there's an even better and more recent example of this, and that's the documentary AlphaGo, which if you haven't seen it, I think that you absolutely have to see it. And of course, it's about the game Go, and uh, and the development of the AI for that. Now, as I understand it, the development for the AI for that was really very different than that of Deep Blue for chess. And AlphaGo, as I understand it, basically they gave the objective of the game to the computer and uh, had it play itself, an unfathomable amount of times to see which strategies one and did. But that's not the point here. It's playing, one of the top ranked players. And of course, this is huge. Go in North America is, non-existent. Although I do have my Pente tube in the corner. But yes, I know it's a bad version of Go. But hey, North Americans, we don't have time to play Go. Um, uh, but it's huge in Asia. And here you have this poor, grandmaster, one of the top three players in the world playing this machine, and the media scrutiny on it was orders of magnitude greater than when Kasparov played Deep Blue, even though again that was a major media event at the time. But there you have the hopes of an entire nation on this individual.
Yeah.
And now he is sitting across from a person, albeit from, I think it was Google that owns AlphaGo, who is making the moves after being told by the, the laptop sitting there. But still, just um, you feel for the guy,
Yeah.
particularly, after he loses the first match. Like, you really feel for the guy. And again, this is part of the human element that um, that uh, uh, that digitization makes. Well, one of the things I just want to say about AlphaGo and getting back to AI and computers, and risk management is, of course, and I forget the exact move. It's move 79 or whatever in game 3. Uh, AlphaGo makes a move that all the commentators and everyone thinks is a mistake, like a massive mistake.
Right.
It's a move that no human would would make. Okay, but because AlphaGo was given no rules, unlike with Big Blue and chess, it was given no rules except what are the objective of the game.
Right.
In one of its gazillion games, it decided that this strange move would increase the probability of winning, so it did it.
Huh.
And this is the thing that, uh, although I very commonly say that AI, almost by definition, cannot produce a paradigm shift. AI, with its inhuman element, can take intelligent risks that appear to be paradigm shifts.
Yeah.
And of course, that changed everything once, and again, all, this player and a whole team of advisors, coaches,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you see them analyzing it afterwards, and basically they realize that they're toast. And you almost want to cry for the guy. You want to bake him a cake or give him a hug or something.
Yeah. You talk a lot about how AI is better at complicated and humans are better at complex. I mean, when you talk about that, that almost seems borderline complex, right? It almost seems like a
Well,
bit of a leap.
one of the things I'm fond of saying is AI is going to take a lot of things, or not a lot, but it's going to take numerous things that we currently believe are complex or even wicked in terms of systems theory. And again, for those of you not familiar, I'm speaking, and Carl and I are speaking in the language of systems theory. So complicated and complex
Yeah.
are not fungible terms here. But I believe that AI is going to take numerous things that we currently consider to be complex and actually find out that they're complicated.
Okay.
I do believe that the digitization will do that in some cases,
Okay.
but yeah, when things are truly complex, I believe that the human who understands complexity will far outdo a computer.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I'd give a shout out to Shad Valley. This is a Canadian government program that I think is just awesome, where they take some of the best high school students in Canada and embed them in one of the U15 research universities in Canada for a couple of weeks over the summer. And I had the honor and privilege of speaking with the group earlier this week at Dalhousie University. And the challenge I gave to them, and by the way, we talked about AI, the pros and cons, and we talked about systems there. We talked about how AI can't deal with complex issues, et cetera, et cetera. But the challenge I gave to them, which I also gave to a top AI executive who will remain nameless, was can we design AI intelligent enough to recognize problems that AI cannot deal with? Now, I'm not talking about the legal, the moral, type issues,
Mm.
but can can we develop AI that is intelligent enough to say this is a problem that AI cannot help you with?
Modest AI. I like it.
An intellectually an AI with intellectual humility, as I call it.
Yeah.
And that was the challenge I posed to the students. I think that is uh, something that few people are talking about, but I think, but read my next book. It's something that few people are talking about, but I believe is going to be a vitally important question, perhaps a decade down the road,
Yeah.
if not before.
Okay. Okay. Well, I want to close on a few things. Yeah, I think it's worth questioning for anybody watching. Does risk have lock-in? Do we have to live with certain starting points? I mean, to my mind, policies come to mind. You build out your policy set, you start in a place, and everything's got to fit that. But you don't always question, is there a different way of doing things which is better? You often think, what came before and how do I fit that? So anyway, have a think about that. Tell us what you think. And Rick, I'm looking forward to some of the books you've recommended over the past year or so. In the next couple of weeks, I'll get to them, and I'm sure there'll be a topic of conversation. I've got Annie Duke, Thinking in Bets. I'm looking forward to that a lot. Risk
By
with
the
Dan
way,
Gardner.
if there's
Yep.
any listeners out there who want us to rip apart what they think is a great risk book, tell them to leave a message.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Um, yeah, a couple others, Same as Ever by Morgan Housel. Really looking forward to that. I've heard a lot about his writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Against the Gods. I mean, that's a Risk classic. The Remarkable Story of Risk.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a fun read.
yeah,
That's a good beach read.
yeah, exactly. Great cover photo too. Just the cover art, the
Yeah.
storm and on the ship trying to navigate in the storm. It's pretty grand. Anyway, when I get to those, I'm sure we'll talk more about them. And until then, goodbye. Subscribe, anybody that's watching, and share your thoughts. And Rick, we'll see you next week.
I just want to give a quick shout out and thanks to the listener who DM'd me about the social anthropology books. I'm almost through both of them and thoroughly loving them. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, do share your book recommendations. We love those. All right. Rick, we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Have fun, everyone.